Commander Grant Dale is Director of Navy Leadership and Culture Development for the RAN. Grant began his naval career as a 15-year-old cadet midshipman in 1976, pursuing a career as a navigating officer. His sea postings have included numerous ships, ultimately leading to commanding officer of HMAS Westralia from 2000 to 2002, during which time he was involved in the first border protection operations in our northern waters. It was the experience of transforming the culture on this particular ship that was the subject of Grant's presentation at our 2003 conference, for those of you that may have been there. Grant is a qualified principal warfare officer, which actually makes him, as he says, a trained killer, and navigation subspecialist. In January 2009, Grant became involved with the New Generation Navy program, specifically to focus on leadership development. He now heads the Navy's Leadership and Culture Development Directorate, where he's actively pursuing his personal mission statement of changing the Navy one person at a time. Please join me in welcoming Grant, who will speak first to the stage, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you today. And for those of you who may have seen me before, it's a real pleasure to be back here. I brought one of my colleagues from the New Generation Navy program to the Human Synergistics conference here in Sydney in 2009. And I was just reflecting with him last night that that was his first exposure to the Human Synergistics material and the conference. And we were talking about it afterwards, and we said, wouldn't it be great if in a few years' time we could be up on that stage telling a great success story about cultural change in Navy? So here I am. The conference theme, if culture is the answer, what is the question, is certainly an intriguing one. For the Douglas Adams fans amongst you, it does remind me somewhat of the fundamental question in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The answer to life, the universe and everything is of course 42. But what was the question? Now, I can't promise you anything as profound as that wholly remarkable book, but I can talk to you a little bit about leadership and cultural reform in Navy. Now, I did prepare several hundred PowerPoint slides and a moderately sized thesis for this, but please don't panic. I've cut that down a little bit, and there's three key messages that I'd like to leave you with today. Firstly, Navy is very proud of our cultural reform program called New Generation Navy. It's been very successful to date and of great benefit to Navy. Secondly, Navy will continue its cultural reform journey. Cultural reform takes time to implement. We've been going for almost 5 years now, and there's plenty more work to do. And thirdly, Navy's cultural reform journey is necessary for our success as a military organisation. While our ships and aircraft are our most visible assets, impressive as they are, our edge, our military competitive advantage, is achieved through the quality of our people. General Patton once said, "You fight wars with technology. You win wars with people." So I'll start by giving you a bit of background on the Royal Australian Navy, because I think that this is necessary to give you a sense for the scale of the task of cultural reform and why we are so pleased with what's been achieved to date. Since Federation in 1901, the Royal Australian Navy has provided maritime forces to defend Australia and protect its national interests. We are a fighting service, a combat organisation. Our mission is to fight and win at sea. Navy, like all military organisations, is a complex mix of modern technology and much older traditions. Navy can be very conservative and seemingly dogmatic because we value the hard-won experience found in combat operations. But we can also be very progressive and flexible, because that can bring a decisive edge in combat capability that leads to military success. Knowing how to reconcile these apparently contradictory influences is a constant challenge, but it's one that we must accept, because both technology and geopolitical factors can and do change rapidly. We can't afford to stand still. A few short months ago, who could have predicted the current situation in the Ukraine or the more recent developments in the Middle East? We must constantly be looking forward and developing both our people and our organisation to deal with the challenges of today and to be prepared for those of tomorrow. Innovation is the key. Agility is the outcome. At the moment, Navy is in the midst of a generational change in terms of modernisation of our capability and the technology to support it. From this year through to the end of this decade, Navy will introduce a number of new ships and aircraft. The scale and type of these new platforms make them quite significant advances to what we currently have in service. These include 2 large amphibious ships known as landing helicopter dock ships. These are the size of an aircraft carrier. They are the largest ships Navy has ever operated. The first of these, HMAS Canberra, will be commissioned into Navy later this year. It will be followed by a new class of guided missile destroyer. These are now building somewhat more slowly than we'd like in Adelaide. These vessels are very advanced and have several new systems in them which will be both great advances and significant challenges to integrate. Concurrently, we're bringing a new helicopter back to Australia, the Seahawk Romeo, which have a variety of sensors and weapons which make them a big step up on their predecessors. And there'll be more in time to come. These new ships and aircraft are all about sustaining our capacity to fulfil our mission, to fight and win at sea. And although the headline prices for Navy equipment are very large, they are expected to operate for decades to come. Australia is not alone in being able to afford such expenditure, but our market edge lies in our people, their skills and their abilities. The technology does not operate autonomously. Each capability must be operated by highly competent, intelligent people. While the technology gets better, that doesn't translate into a less skilled workforce. In fact, quite the opposite. We need to recruit and retain the best from the breadth of Australian society. Looking back a few years, we weren't ready for this. In 2008, we did not have a stable workforce, and the most likely future projections were not adequate. We faced both recruitment and retention challenges. Our separation rate was in excess of 11%, and we were under strength in many core work groups and rank levels. Bottlenecks in our training pipeline were preventing us from developing the expertise and skills at the rate required to meet these future capability requirements. And in part, the high operational tempo for Navy over the previous decade in the important roles of counter-piracy, humanitarian aid and border protection operations had actually degraded our high-end warfighting skills. Our ships, boats, submarines and airframes had all been driven hard, and so had our people. And regrettably, through this period, we also suffered some degradation of our safety standards, which had significant consequences in terms of both airworthiness and seaworthiness. And on top of all of this, Navy, and Defence more broadly, was suffering from reputational issues within the Australian community. We had lost some of the trust and confidence traditionally placed in us by government and by the Australian public. In essence, in late 2008, Navy concluded that it simply could not keep on doing what it was doing. We had identified significant concerns around our people, our performance, and our professionalism, and we needed to address these. We needed to operate more efficiently and more effectively to be able to meet the challenges posed by a future fleet while maintaining our market edge, the quality of our people. So our question was, how can Navy leaders collectively lead and inspire 14,000 people to better meet current and future challenges? Our answer was cultural reform. So in 2009, Navy established a major program of cultural renewal to be known as New Generation Navy, or NGN, because we do like our acronyms after all, and all the better if they have 3 letters. Now, NGN is founded on a clear statement of cultural intent. It's about having a Navy that is trusted to defend Australia and its interests by being ready to fight and win at sea. A Navy that is proven to deliver seaworthy and mission-ready forces. And a Navy that is diverse and respectful always, where we live our signature behaviours and values every day. The initial NGN strategy in 2009 was shaped around 3 pillars of culture, structure and leadership. Our aim was to build a culture that supported people during and beyond their service and empowered them to make a respected contribution, to streamline accountability and focus on the generation and training of Navy's capability, and to create an organisation that develops leaders of integrity, moral courage and loyalty. Through a process of consultation, we identified a number of discrete projects that needed to be addressed, and we prioritised these. They were focused on leadership, our signature behaviours, people-focused work practices, and our training pipeline. And today I'd like to dwell for just a moment on 2 of these, the signature behaviours and the leadership program. In particular, the signature behaviours were very important to us. In many ways, it's easy to come up with sweeping statements of cultural intent, and they look good on a PowerPoint slide or in a glossy brochure. But what we wanted to achieve was a practical change across the organisation. How we behaved in all aspects of our business, collectively and individually, was crucial. The introduction of Navy's signature behaviours was a vital part of gaining organisation-wide buy-in to the whole of the NGN program. They were designed to enable Navy people to truly understand our Navy values and what these actually looked like in terms of simple, everyday behaviour. They were driven through the organisation by a series of facilitated sessions delivered by leaders at the local level. Because of their fundamental importance, we've continued to run additional locally led programs to embed these, and they now also form part of our initial entry training packages. Throughout, the message has been strong and consistent, and it is simply this: if you cannot align your own values to those of Navy through adoption of these signature behaviours, then there is simply no place in this organisation for you. Turning to our leadership program, there are many views held about military leadership by both those in uniform and those outside of it, and both often influenced far too much by Hollywood. What we wanted to do through our leadership program was to fundamentally challenge people's existing thinking about leadership. And in doing so, we decided to approach the subject from a philosophical or conceptual approach rather than a competency-based box-ticking one. Our Navy leadership framework is an expression of how the values of individuals contribute to effective group mission accomplishment. And while much of our society focuses on the performance of individuals, it's team performance that really counts, and certainly that is the case for Navy. We wanted to encourage people to reflect on the effectiveness of their own leadership style and get them to think and make decisions about their own and their team's behaviours. We wanted to empower them. As a way to more easily understand thinking and behaviour and to provide a language with which to discuss it, Navy introduced the Human Synergistics Circumplex and started using 360-degree feedback for mid-level and senior leaders. The Circumplex is a really useful graphical representation of some very measurable behaviours. We use them during our 3-day leadership workshops, where we look at individual and group behaviour. We look at the links between leadership and organisational culture, and we talk about the responsibilities of leaders at all levels to set or change the culture within their organisation. And to further support achievement of personal change, our Navy leaders are given the opportunity to engage an executive coach following their leadership workshop. So between 2010 and 2014, more than 3,000 Navy leaders have engaged in the first of their 3-day leadership development workshops, including receiving LSI 360 feedback. And we've given shorter versions of the workshops to another 4,000 plus people during initial entry and career progression training. Last year, we commenced running our second iteration of our 3-day leadership program. And while the first workshop had been designed around providing Navy leaders with an awareness and acceptance of the impact of their own leadership styles, the second workshop focuses more on translating this knowledge into action through targeted skills development. There is an expectation by the Chief of Navy that all Navy leaders will come back to these workshops every 3 years. Through feedback, reflection and action, we expect all Navy leaders to take on the challenge of continual improvement of themselves and the team. Now in 2012, 3 years into our NGN program, Navy considered the future of our cultural reform. While the metrics we were seeing were encouraging, 2 things were clear. First, and perhaps not surprisingly, the program needed to run beyond its initial 5-year horizon. And second, that it would need to evolve to cater for where Navy was going to be in 2013. Things had changed in our landscape. Our people had evolved, as had government's expectations of us. We needed to adapt our strategy accordingly. The 2013 relaunch of NGN aimed to deliver 5 essential outcomes, and those were to be ready to fight and win at sea, to deliver Navy's agreed capability to government, to maintain the confidence of the government and the Australian public, to become a more capable and diversely integrated Navy workforce, and to successfully reform and continuously improve. And so this led to the development of the current 3 NGN pillars of warfighting and seaworthiness, improvement and accountability, and values-based people-centred leadership. But importantly, just as Navy was refreshing NGN, the broader Defence Organisation commenced its own cultural reform program, known as Pathway to Change. And this was a direct result of what some of you may recognise as what came to be known as the ADFA Skype incident. For Navy, this was both a positive and a challenge. The positive aspect was the mutually supporting aims of both programs, but the challenge for us was to meet our responsibilities to the broader Defence Organisation while not actually doing any damage to the cultural change we already had in place. Essentially, we were concerned that if we moved to a new cultural change program, even one that was consistent with the previous one, then people might just think, oh, well, they weren't really serious about the first one, were they? And so we would risk undoing the good work that NGN had achieved, and we would reduce the chance of success for Pathways. So in the end, we convinced the broader Defence Organisation that NGN and Pathways were very similar and that NGN could deliver cultural change for Navy. So how are we doing? With all of this activity and training, what have we actually achieved? A question which we really must keep in mind because we started out with what we perceived as real problems. We've spent a lot of real time and real money addressing them. And so we're looking for real changes. So in assessing how well Navy has answered the exam question to date, we have a number of measures available to us. One of them is the results we get from our OCI and OEI data. We've measured Navy's culture using the OCI and OEI on 3 occasions now, in 2010, 2011 and 2013. Over that period, we've achieved an overall change in all 12 of the OCI styles towards constructive, with an average shift of 11 percentile points. You can see in this slide that all of the blue constructive styles have seen a consistent step change up, while all of the red and green defensive styles show a consistent step change down. And this means that while we certainly have a long way to go, we're definitely moving in the right direction. And the degree and the rate of change suggests to me that we're doing this in a sustainable way. And we see similar and consistent shifts with our outcomes and causal factors data that are shown in our OEI results. Furthermore, acceptance of the OCI across Navy has been evidenced by individual units seeking assistance in terms of doing something further with their own data, which signals a move from a reactive to a proactive approach to culture development. It's a generative system. But while Navy-wide data is useful, the most valuable benefits of the cultural analysis are at what we call the individual unit level: ships, squadrons, and so on. Here's an example of what's been achieved within our recruit training school over a much longer period, where specific time, energy and resources were devoted specifically to changing the culture within that micro-environment. Here's an example of a shore establishment that has achieved a remarkable change over a very short time. It's at this unit level that we can best help our leaders and managers to understand the impact of their decisions and their behaviours. It's here that we can empower them to make changes to affect their own cultural transformation programs. And it's the cumulative impact of change at this level that is most effective in changing Navy-wide cultural transformation. This is a bottom-up approach. To further encourage and assist individual units to take action with the data they receive, Navy now has a small number of culture coaches who work alongside unit command teams to assist them in identifying the what and the how to create effective local actions. But there's other measures that confirm what the OCI and OEI data is telling us. We've made progress on our recruitment and capability challenges. Our separation rate has decreased dramatically. We've reduced the size of our training force. And this means that we have more people in their primary roles ready to meet the needs of government. At the same time, over the last 5 years, we've also had a 21% increase in our operational sea days. And we've also improved our people's understanding of their roles, responsibilities, and their contributions to our mission. The research from Human Synergistics suggests that the most fundamentally important thing in order for people to feel motivated in any organisation is to understand what is the organisation's purpose and how they personally contribute to that purpose. This graphic suggests that we're doing something right in this regard. But we're also making good progress on the standards of behaviour from people in Navy. People are actually using the NGN behaviours in their workplace. Now, here I readily acknowledge that the narrative from the general media would not seem to be consistent with my statement. So let me explore this subject a little more. The first thing about it is that NGN was not introduced in Navy as a direct response to a specific incident of poor behaviour. But it is certainly true that a healthy and positive culture is the antithesis of the poor behaviours. And while we hope never to have any sort of incident, they do actually make it easier to argue the case for cultural reform. Another positive example of change for us is that since 2009, we have increased our alcohol and substance abuse testing programs, and yet the rates for positive tests has decreased significantly. Our reported incidence of unacceptable behaviours has decreased by 23%. And while any incidence is unacceptable, it's important to note this significant improvement over a 5-year period. And we've also recently received accreditation as a white ribbon workplace, and we are the largest organisation in Australia to have done so. New Generation Navy has given us not only a common goal, it's given us a common language to discuss leadership and behaviour. Navy people are now ready to be involved in more honest conversations about leadership and ethical behaviour. And collectively, these changes have improved the way we operate. NGN success is widely recognised, but we know that we've got a lot more work to do. Here you can see our NGN journey map, which is another tool to describe what we're about. If you look carefully around the map, you'll find all of the things that make up our journey. We use it as a means to start discussions, and it never fails at that. We must raise our standards further to deliver fully on our seaworthiness obligations and our warfighting responsibilities. We need to work harder to improve accountability for our behaviour and our performance. In the end, cultural reform is an enduring activity. It's not a fire and forget weapon. Our society is always changing and Navy must evolve with it. We're a national institution and we must live up to the best standards from across the breadth of Australian society. Competition is fierce for the best people. Australia's a diverse nation and we want to be able to attract the very best Australians, whatever their background. For this, we need to be an organisation where they know that they can be successful and comfortable in the environment, and we continue to work on this. In closing, let me say, it's not about political correctness. It's about having an organisation where people are treated decently and are respected. To achieve our mission, to fight and win at sea, we must fight as a team. And to do that, we must have respect for everyone in that team. We must have a culture that includes, not excludes. A positive, productive culture aligned with the best of the breadth of Australian society does not just happen by itself. It takes positive, conscious, sustained effort. And that is something to which Navy is committed. I'll now hand you over to my colleague, Commander Ros Aspelk, who's going to share with you some of our recent research findings. Thank you.